Why are we here? Is VR on the hype curve? Is this all a passing fad? Is this the next big thing in media? That's what everyone's wondering. That's why this is one of the biggest events that the Daily News Innovation Lab has hosted so far, I think. I tweeted a video just a few minutes ago, or a couple of hours ago, about perhaps the first VR head-mounted display experience, which was in 1968, a guy called Ivan Sutherland. So go check that out. The form factor was there. Jaron Lanier had a company in the early 90s trying to do this stuff. This technology, these ideas have been around for a long time, but now it's happening. I think our panelists will tell you why. It has a lot to do with these, but there's a lot coming. More than $1 billion in VC funding in virtual reality since January of this year. Eye-popping market estimates from Goldman Sachs that I think has stirred some people in boardrooms that are difficult to stir. High-profile experiments like those at the New York Times. Everyone can turn around and wave at the Times later on tonight. And so perhaps the biggest thing that's changing on this, mobile technologies, most of the technology you need to deliver, and in some cases now capture VR experiences, are right here in the phones in our pockets, with the addition of, in some cases, a pair of very cheap lenses. So I think that's why this is a sellout event, why there's so many people here tonight that are curious about this. We have a great panel of folks who are going to give us hopefully some real insights into what they're doing to make virtual reality content and what the future will look like over the next 3 years. But before we start, I want to ask just a couple of questions of you. How many of you have tried some kind of VR? Okay. All right, almost everyone. These are important questions. The panelists wanted to know these questions because the audience is different depending on the answer to these. How many of you have created content for VR? Okay. How many of you would like to? Right. All right, so a good number. All right, so that'll give us some sense of who we're talking to. And I think we'll go ahead and get started with our first presentation, which, as Sina mentioned, is going to be from Tom Small, who is a producer and director at the YouTube Creator Lab. He's going to come up. He's got 5 to 7 minutes.
How many of you got a cardboard? All right, we're going to try and get cardboards to the rest of the world sometime in the next day or two. But I'm glad that you guys have them. And this is a big part of what Google is trying to do. When Facebook announced that they bought Oculus, we jokingly think of cardboard as Oculus thrift. And the thing that we're trying to do with cardboard is really to democratize VR, especially in these early stages where we're just trying to get the word out there that this is a thing that is possible because of the smartphone devices that we have. And that's why it's happening now and not in the 1990s when a lot of hardworking people were really hoping it would happen. There's often a conversation in the media, or especially as we see startups trying to become the YouTube of VR. And here at YouTube, we think YouTube is the YouTube of VR. And so even in just the last few months, as we've started to put spherical videos on YouTube, over 50,000 spherical videos were uploaded to YouTube last year. 7,500 channels have done more than just one stunt spherical video. You know, they've done more than just the, hey guys, this is kind of cool, check this out. 200 channels have done more than 20 spherical videos. And the corollary to all this is that the average watch time on those videos is 2 to 3 minutes. So what that means is that we're still in this like early stage of like, whoa, look, all around you, it's a novelty. And a lot of my mission with the YouTube space is to help get past that point and help educate the audience that this is possible, and to help educate the creators that, hey, this is a new medium, and we can, once everyone has gotten used to the idea that you can look around at everything, how can we start to tell compelling narratives, whether they be stories or what are they, narratives? We're not sure yet. It's a new medium, but how we can convey compelling messages in some way through this new medium, because right now it's the Wild West and we don't know the grammar of this new medium yet. So on YouTube 360, if you go on your, so wait, how many of you have Android devices? Raise your hand. And how many of you have Apple devices, iOS? Oh, that's always the way, isn't it? So Right now, I will say that YouTube 360 does work on Android and iOS. But very soon, you'll be able to view YouTube 360 in Cardboard on iOS. Right now, it's just Android. Give us a couple months, we're going to get that working for you. So when you get home, don't just take that Cardboard and say, cool, swag, and put it on the shelf. Please unfold it, put your phone in it, and check it out. You can download the Cardboard app, which is iOS or Android. There are many apps that will work for either platform, and hang in there because YouTube is going to be one of them for iOS coming soon. In Android, it's happening right now. So the reason we're excited about, and we feel that Cardboard can really democratize VR is because PlayStation VR, HTC Vive, and Oculus Rift are expensive and hard to get just because of the fact that you have to buy a PC that'll run it, or you have to buy the $800 or the $600 headset. But Cardboard, hey, we're giving them away for free tonight, and you already have the phone that can run it. So we are just trying to seed the world with these devices because we believe at Google that VR is the next computing platform, not just an entertainment platform. And we're all going to be Tom Cruise in Minority Report, managing our data in the next few years. And the first step is just to get the word out there that this is possible. When you go home and you take those lucky few who have Android can open up a YouTube 360 video. You can tap the little Android or the little Cardboard icon, and it will split it into 2 views, and then you'll be able to watch YouTube in 360 in Cardboard. So these are for those of you who want to create 360 videos, and feel free to come up to me afterwards, and we can dig into the dirt about the pros and cons. But there are many, many cameras coming onto the market, and believe me, it's changing like every 3 months. Every 3 months, I'm at the YouTube Spaces giving a class, and I'm like, actually, that camera we used to recommend, nope, this one's better. Look, it just came out. And this is evolving constantly. So here's a few. Very excited about some of these, like the Nikon Key Mission, some of the ones that are all-in-one, and the Samsung Gear 360. These are cameras that do the stitching inside the camera. And how many of you have stitched a 360 video from like a ball of GoPros or something like that? How many enjoyed that process? I don't see, well, one person. Okay, so yeah, we all want to get past the technical parts and just be able to tell compelling stories, and especially if you're in a journalistic capacity trying to just get the story, you certainly got to get it out quick, and you don't want to be home stitching. So there are we'll talk cameras like later if people want to ask questions, but other rigs that have many different different configurations, different lenses, different form factors. The one that Google is bringing out later this year is the GoPro Jump Odyssey, which has 16 cameras in there, and what you do is you upload all 16 memory cards up into Google's cloud, and it chews on it overnight, and it interpolates virtual camera positions between each of the actual camera positions so that you have a stereoscopic, seamless, stitchless 360 video that we believe is like, and it's easy to use. You don't have to stitch it yourself. And these will be also in the YouTube Spaces. So those of you who have YouTube channels, you can come and you can use it at the YouTube Spaces for free and stitch your seamless, beautiful stereoscopic videos. Because we have bandwidth, fast bandwidth at the YouTube Spaces, the uploads are quick, and the cameras are allowed to leave the space because we believe that VR is out there. It is not just inside a studio. So this is me out in the Republic of Congo in the rainforest with the jump camera getting footage of gorillas. And they were curious about this spaceship that had landed in their backyard, and they came right up to the camera. So if any of you want to come up to me, it's on YouTube. Check it out. It's on YouTube on the 360 channel. So what does journalism look like in VR and in 360 video? I have a feeling it won't look like this, which is just, they were just doing a fun experiment, which is great. But, the form of this television studio, it was designed for a completely different use. And so just to try to stick 360 in the middle of something that was, we're going to need experiences and videos that are custom designed with VR in mind. And it's going to take a while to figure out what is that? And we can start to talk about some best practices. Honestly, I think it probably will look a little bit more like this. If you want to go to a Trump rally, you can, or if you don't, then you can watch it in 360. But the point is that here we are as someone who was there. And you have the experience of like, oh, that's what it's like to be there in the crowd. Because I believe that VR wants to be your point of view. It wants to be, especially the more we get away from just Magic Window where you're just holding your phone, and when you put it on your face, I believe that the medium has to do with you in a place, more so than just, hey, this is a 360 camera and I'm going to walk around and it's like, no, it's you. And so when I'm giving lessons to creators, the first thing I try to impress upon them is that the camera is a person, or it will be when someone puts it on their face. And you have to treat the camera as if it's a person at a place. And so, for instance, if you walk around with a handheld 360 camera, your audience is going to feel like they're in King Kong's grip because there's a giant hand wrapped around the camera. And so you want to treat the camera like a person and not just like a camera. You don't want to whip it around. You don't want to rotate it because you've told your viewer that they have the ability to rotate. And if you are whipping around and rotating this camera, suddenly you're doing battle with the viewer and they're going to think that someone's got their head and is yanking them from side to side. So the challenge then is, how do you move the camera if you're going to move it? There are all kinds of creative ways. Here, for this video, they're doing an army scene, and here's the cameraman in the back, and he's got the rig, and he's dressed up just like one of the performers or one of the soldiers. And so I think it's a brand new day, so you don't have to follow the old rules. Maybe it's okay to see the cameraman. Maybe it's okay to see the whole crew. Maybe that's the story that you're telling. Or hide behind a tree, whatever it is that's helpful. You've got to keep it level because otherwise you're putting your audience on the deck of the Titanic. A lot of good use cases, just stick it on a monopod at the height of someone's eyes, whether they're sitting or standing. And always place the camera in such a way. I'm not used to giving this talk over a longer period of time, so I'm going real fast here, guys. But think about the blindfold moment. You're revealing a space. This is what you're doing to your audience. And it's like, oh, now look where you are. How many of you saw The Displaced? The New York Times video, yeah. So this was a video in which we were here with these various children in war-torn countries, and you see, and I'm of course scrolling it for you in the picture here, but where you see where they live, and it's a war-torn place. And I feel like there's a lot of buzz about, oh, VR is an empathy machine and it's just magically empathetic, and I feel like it can be. Usually when I'm watching VR, I feel a lot of empathy for myself, and I'm like, ooh, what do I see? What happens if I turn my head? What's over here? Where am I? Me. And I feel like it's not like I care as much about what's out there. I care what's happening to me. So this is the key. We have to lean into this. We have to use this. And we have to think, what if this was my house? And if you create experiences that work that way, like this one, where we imagine what it's like to be in...
Welcome to solitary confinement.
Solitary confinement.
This is at most an 8x10 cement box. And this is where you'll be living for 23 hours a day.
So that goes on and you hear sounds, but the point is that your audience is the main character in the video. And you need to place them in someone else's shoes so that they experience the world in a different way, because that is what VR can do, is help you experience the world in a different way. So the other thing to remember is that this is just the beginning. It's going to get a lot cooler, it's going to get a lot lighter, it's going to get a lot simpler to use, and we won't have wires attached to us. It'll be, virtual reality will be right here maybe.
Story Up VR is a VR journalism company based in Columbia, Missouri, right in the middle of the nation's digital storytelling belt. You guys didn't know, but there's a storytelling belt that goes all the way through Missouri, so a lot of digital storytellers there. And my primary message I want to impart to you is that story is king, right? Despite all the tech. And we really need to remember that when it comes to creating these immersive experiences. So we're a VR journalism social enterprise, in that a lot of the stories that we do are meant to provide legs to a program we have that allows terminally ill and aging veterans, disabled individuals, people who are homebound, the ability to travel if they don't have the opportunity to physically travel. So we'll talk about some of what our street team does coming up. They asked me to talk a little bit about our business model, and so we are set up kind of like a mini newspaper or television station. So we have a sales department that actually sells VR and immersive products, and then we have a journalism studio. So a journalism studio and a brand studio that finances some of our journalism. Our revenue streams are, we do VR video, storytelling, production, consulting, and we also have product sales that we'll talk about coming up in just a moment. And then we also have impact streams. Because we're a social enterprise, all of our profits are going to support some of these endeavors, including Honor Everywhere, which is a program for terminally ill and aging veterans who aren't able to physically travel to see their memorials in Washington, D.C. So we captured them in stereoscopic 360. They can go there and feel like they're actually there. We also do a lot of storytelling for nonprofits and schools as well. And kids in Columbia, Missouri are learning how to be immersive storytellers with a program that we have there inside the STEAM bus. So a little bit about our business model and that you know, we are selling VR, and what is that value proposition? Well, the old way is that you were outside of the video, right? And the new way is that we have the ability to step inside the video and see all the way around. Well, why is that valuable to brands and people consuming your content? Well, there's a phenomenon out there about immersive video. It increases the time spent watching by 5 times, the viewing frequency by 6 times. These are estimations from studies. And the likelihood of sharing 7.5 times. A lot of times when we show individuals our journalism, even 80 and 90-year-olds, because we work with a lot of aging veterans, they'll take off the headset and say, "Can I watch it again?" And why? It's estimated 65% of virtual reality revenue will derive from video content. Video content by 2020, guys, that's just in 4 years. You all have probably seen this graphic. In 2020, there will be estimated 25 million headsets out there. What will those new screens need? They're going to need content, right? So all of you in this room are, poised to be creating that content. It's not going to be the accessories or the headsets that are bringing in the revenue. It will be the content. $22 billion industry by 2020, and you heard Justin estimate with the Goldman Sachs VR AR together an $80 billion market by 2025. So what works and what's next? And that's what we're talking about here today. So some of the ways that people are distributing their content, and distribution is a sore spot. Any of you all who have created immersive experiences know that you not only have to create it, but you have to have a distribution plan on how you create it, and that's tough when some legacy media organizations aren't really familiar with the platform as well. So you have a variety of options. You can create your own app, right, and do it yourself. If you have 25 grand lying around and you want to make an iOS or an Android app. YouTube, obviously a great option if you want it to be seen on Android and iOS as well. Vrideo is out there. Shrimp Eyes is another VR video platform, as well as Little Star, and you're familiar with the Oculus platform in the Samsung Gear VR. Another option that people are just starting to do is forego the app, and they're creating mobile sites. So WebGL, WebVR sites that you can actually direct people to a mobile site in order to view your video content. So who knows how much in the future, what's the longevity of flat apps? Will we all be directing people to immersive mobile sites in order to view our VR content? Who knows? Perhaps that's what's next. I mentioned honoreverywhere.com. This was a story that we did with Jaunt VR, and you see that the veteran is able to use cardboard, and Google kicked in cardboard that those veterans are able to feel like they're there. Sadly, a lot of these individuals aren't able to physically travel, and all of the individuals that we featured in that story have now passed away. One of the things that we learned from this project was the importance of street teams. So it's not enough just to create the journalism, but you also really need a street team to go out and disseminate it, not just on your apps, but in your own local communities. And you'd be surprised what kind of traction you get from physically sharing it with different people. So we go out to Boys and Girls Clubs, assisted living centers, nursing homes, events, and actually share our content. So we've created about half a dozen different immersive video experiences. This is one that puts people inside some of the places where our homeless veterans sleep, inside the woods. And you see the lady on the bottom, we were at an event and we allowed people to actually step inside that camp and imagine what it might be like if they had to live in some of those places. As a lot of you know who are creating any kind of immersive video, VR is like sausage. It's very easy to stitch, or easy to shoot. It's very difficult to stitch, right? We go through a half a dozen different software programs in order to create it. It's not easy to do. Some of the things that could make your life easier, besides using some of the camera rigs that are tailor-made and completely stitched, but if you don't have access to those and you are working with GoPros, which GoPro is a great option, but you can do some things in the capture that makes it easier. So sail mounts. I don't know if you guys have played with these, but these are third-person viewers on the back. And you have the ability to walk very slowly through a space or stand stationary, and it allows the person to see as if they were right behind you. Angled tripods, not just on a stick. The reason for that, it has to do with the stitch line. So if it's on an angled tripod in certain situations, that's unique. There we're shooting in Zambia, and we'll talk about that story in just a moment. It's about people who have to crawl on the ground because they don't have mobility. We also experiment a lot with helmet cams as well. So in addition to what's worked, interviewing people. We've had to, totally abandon the former fixed frame rules of journalism on interviews and develop it in a new way. So the way we interview individuals are by leaving the room. We essentially have them interview themselves. We have a little handy cam that hooks up to a Sony body pack, and it's a wireless mic, and we mic up the person and we take that handy cam into another room. It allows us to listen to that interview remotely, and we tell them before we start the interview, or we put it on a post-it note, hey, these are the things that we want you to cover, and we can hear whether or not they cover. And we have a little sign where we tell individuals, we say when you're done, you say Marco, and we'll say Polo. So they're done, they say Marco, we yell Polo, we know to come out, and then we can see how the interview went. One of the things that we found, what has worked with interviews, is the fact that the candidness of the interviews is really far more compelling than anything I've done in the fixed frame world. And honestly, I think it's because there's someone not standing right next to you, looking in your eyes with a notebook and nodding your head with the camera, as if they're in a room by yourself and they're talking to themselves. And the next fixed frame story we do, or 16 by 9 inch story that we do, I'm going to experiment with leaving the room, because the sound that you get from that is almost in a way far more compelling than you would when you're standing behind the camera. So any of you all, shooting in the fixed frame world, you might try that. Leaving the room, it is really producing some really fascinating sound.
2 minutes.
Story Up Zambia is a project that we did in Africa. The trailer for it is out now, so if you all would like to see it, I have a couple of gear VRs, and you can be in Zambia and you can feel like you are, in the shoes of these individuals who have to crawl on the ground because they lack mobility. The reason why I have a can of condensed air is because we went through a half a dozen cans in Zambia trying to keep the cameras cool. So those GoPros, they heat up a lot. That's one thing, a tip and trick that you can use is a can of condensed air and spray it and it cools it down. Drones are tailor-made for VR video. We worked with Mizzou's drone journalism program, and the reason why is it requires minimal camera rigging. And so it is a great experience that you can fly slowly over areas. I also want to mention Spherica. Alina is in the room tonight if you raise your hand. They're doing some fascinating work in Russia with drones as well, some of the best drone work that I've seen. And I'd really encourage you to check out, she has a Gear VR, and she'd be happy to show you some of the great work that Spherica is doing. Here's an experience that we did about stroke, allowing people to step inside the shoes. What is it like to experience a stroke? What do you see? Step inside their MRI, and you see how these graphics are shaped differently. When you create immersive video experiences, you also have to have a graphic designer who knows how to manipulate those graphics inside of the sphere. So there are a variety of tools out for that. Skybox and Metal are 2 tools. Dashwood VR tools are 2 other tools as well that you can use to manipulate those graphics. So bottom line, the internet is becoming a world that we can step into. So our storytelling also needs to be immersive, because individuals will be wanting to not only step into those spaces, but have content that they can consume in those places. What's next? It is the metaverse. It is room scale VR, and it is hand controls. You see he has an HTC Vive on his head. He has hand controls that he's able to manipulate in an environment. For instance, I was in an environment not too long ago, and we're playing ping pong with someone on the other side of the room with our hands. All of that is coming to video, right? Hand controls not only in the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, but mobile VR, right? We're going to have the ability to have hand controls in mobile VR. Light field cameras, the ability to walk through our video, pick up 3D objects within that video. If you're watching anything that's happening with the Lytro Emerge cameras that are coming out that are doing light field capture, haptics, and Project Tango. Keep an eye on Project Tango, because we know that that will have great value in VR as it relates to going through rooms. And also Tilt Brush, the ability to take a brush and paint and draw in VR. And how might that change our journalism when our comments aren't just on a text screen, when we actually have the ability to write on a graffiti wall or something like that. That would be fascinating to watch. I want to close just by giving you a book recommendation. Perhaps some of you in this room have already read Ready Player One. How many of you guys have read it? Okay, I'd encourage you to read it. Steven Spielberg has agreed to direct the movie, and it will be coming out, and everybody will know what it is. But it talks about the metaverse and how our world is becoming a place that you step into. So read it, keep doing those stories, but above all, story is king despite the tech, and there are a lot of different ways that we are experimenting to direct the viewer's attention with sound, with graphics, with cues in our narration. But the more that we keep in mind that the story is paramount, not necessarily tech, the better off we will be.
But I'm going to tell you what we're doing at the AP about VR, right? And one thing we want to keep in mind is every time we have a new technology, some people really question it, and some people don't know where the technology is going. And I really love this quote that my colleague, Francesco, quote. It's actually a New York Times review in 1939 about television. Right? The problem with TV is that people must sit and keep their eyes glued on the screen. The average American family hasn't time for it. I don't know what the average American family is doing in 1939. They're so busy they can't watch TV. But we can see that VR and some of the technology is in the same conversation, right? A lot of questions that's being asked is, do you think this is sustainable? Do you see that this is going to be enduring? And my answer is yes. I think it will be sustainable because of mobile device, right? When AP started exploring virtual reality in August, me and a couple of people just like, let's experiment on virtual reality. And people just like, what is that? Is that like 3D modeling? Is it something that you could just, or they have flashback of some movies from the 80s that deal with virtual reality. And so what we end up doing is really our first project off the gate is something very, very immersive. And so what we end up doing is a project called Sweet Life, where we use a Matterport camera, where we scan the physical space of the Time Warner suite in Four Seasons. Now, that suite is $50,000 a night. And that pillow is $10,000, the pillow that you'd be sleeping on. So when our folks went in and scanned the space, they have to put in like a special slipper so they don't scratch the floor and everything like that. So once we scan the space, we look at how do we have people explore that space. So using Unity, we had created a one-off app in Oculus, where when you put on the Oculus and download the app, you're able to explore that space from point to point to point. And it was really a learning experience for the AP, because we have to ask ourselves, why do we need this in a virtual reality experience? What's so special about this suite that people should put on this headset and waste the time on it, right? You know, it's a lot of work. Like you put on the headset, you have to like, especially if you have glasses like me, like, you know, you have to take it off, adjust it. It's a lot of work. But once you put yourself in the environment, you can see what the other people are living like $50,000 a night. And what we learned at that point is when we set up these waypoints, the first time we did it was too fast. People got sick, right? Because we did the Taiwan suite, we also did a luxury suite in the Queen Mary that take you from upstairs to downstairs. When you go from upstairs downstairs through the staircase, it's quite daunting, right? Because your mind is tricking you. Like, you know, you're standing here and you're looking at this staircase and suddenly you go from point A to point B and it's telling you it's almost like free falling. So most of the times when we did that experience, we tell people you should sit down and just like don't go too fast. And we went back and forth in terms of figuring out the speed of the waypoint. And that's something that we didn't really think about from the get-go as a storyteller. The other thing that we question is when we do these scans, and this is Nathan who used the Matterport camera to scan, we have to ask the hotel and the airline and the cruise companies, is this bottle of champagne, like, is that what you normally get in this suite, or do you just put it here because we're doing this experience, right? Because we say virtual reality, we have assumption that this must be real, right? This is as the world you see it. But being the AP, we have 170 years of experience of standards. So we question every single thing. We say, you know, this steak that you're serving, is this a dinner that you're going to get from Singapore Airlines, or do you just demo it? Because when we publish this, we're basically telling this is your experience. We can't have someone, like a PR person, say, hey, let's put this nice basket of, you know, chocolate, and because it looked nice. So at the same time, we're asking ourselves, what are some of the standards and ethical issues that come from VR? And one of the things that when we scan here at the Taiwan suite, their bathroom had lots and lots of mirrors. There's no way to hide. And you're not even running fast enough for the camera to do the spin. So we just kind of let it be. If you see the camera, you see the camera, because we think that's the right thing to do from a journalistic standard point of view. So once we went from that experience, we say, this is not very feasible from a day-to-day. We could see that doing a very specialized project. So the second project we did, we partnered with Riot. And we basically did a first-person documentary style, documenting the Calais migrants in northern France, and where we basically follow that camp and see how they want to cross across the British Channel to get to London. And again, what we learned there is, because we're partnering with Riot, you know, working with documentary and filmmaker, the way they tell the story and the way news people tell the story is very different. So what we like about that experience is we're able to blend the best of two worlds. We're able to push the boundaries of how do we bring in some of the more cinematic experience, bring in some of the documentary style storytelling, but still stay true to the news. And I would say it's a learning effort for both parties. And with that experience, we also learned that, you know, when we have the rig, it's stationary, and, you know, it's about 4 meters. So sometimes you will see someone's head, and it's weird, and, you know, if you're balding, then it's kind of sad, like myself. But, you know, so there's a lot of learning lessons in terms of, like, when we do the interview, we have to make sure that the position that we're placing the subject is actually in a distance that's comfortable, right? When it's too close, then some of the stitching get really warped. When they're too far, they become too tiny. And the fundamental question that we ask is, why the hell do you need to turn around and look behind you, right? And it's still kind of like the questions. Beyond the first moment of just like, wow, look at this cam, and it's really at a disarray, why else do you want to turn around, right? And that's still a question that we need to ask. I mean, think about this event here. It's set up for 180. It's not set up for 360. You go to the fashion show, the entire event is set up for this little tiny screen so that you get that great picture. So we're confronted that with the experience that as we're thinking about storytelling, most of the world is not thinking storytelling in the 360 format. So the third experience we did was really short because at that point, Google and, I know I'm running over, I'm gonna wrap it up really quick. Google and New York Times partnered up and distribute all the Google Cardboard. So we did a CGI experience explaining the supermoon. 30 seconds, because we know when you put on the cardboard, you really don't want to hold the cardboard for like 10 minutes. Like, I'm kind of lazy. Holding a cardboard with my Android device is really tiring. So we want to make sure that we are able to create quick experience that explains something really simple. So in this experience, we actually tell people what to do. We say, follow the moon, right? So as the moon orbits around the sun, then it makes you go all the way around, and we do the narration. And the same thing as Star Wars, we decided to have a host to talk about VR, right? Because sometimes when you have an event to let things happen, it's really distorting. Like, you're looking to the right, but something really important is happening to the left. So we figured that maybe in this scenario, we want to invite hosts that could guide you through. Hey, Harrison Ford is coming down the red carpet, right? So that you could physically look to the left and to the right. And I would say we're still trying to perfect that experience. You know, again, as new publishing technology, we invent how we experience news. VR do promise to be the next evolution. And just today, AP had published our 9th VR experience in conjunction with Riot, and also want to give a shout out to Lena and Spirit Gear because we used their rover to film the moving part, and it's quite stable where you're not vomiting.
I'm Marcelle Hopkins. I'm a director, writer, and co-producer of On the Brink of Famine, which is an immersive documentary that we produced for Frontline, the PBS program, and for the Brown Institute for Media Innovation. Our first day of shooting in South Sudan, and it was a complete disaster, as you can tell from Ben's face. And we can talk about what went wrong a little bit later. I've actually documented it for you. But we went to South Sudan last summer for a month in August and September and filmed all over the country. This was also a still shot from the selfie that we took. This is what was happening, which is why we were so stressed out. You can see our camera rig there in the middle. It's an array of 6 GoPros in a cube formation, and that is our mic down at the bottom. If you can see with the Zoom recorder and all the cables that we had to mask out later. We took this is the second camera that we were working with. We took it all over the country. This is in a refugee camp, or an internally displaced persons camp in South Sudan. And we're trying to rig up the mic out of sight. So that's what Ben is doing there, hanging over the side of this guard tower. We put it on a boat. We took it to where the rebels were training. We did all sorts of things with it and learned a lot along the way. We spent several months stitching and editing, working with Frontline on crafting the story. And the heroes at Frontline really rescued it from kind of the mess that it was in our first draft and helped us to craft it into a coherent, compelling narrative, which we just launched last week on Thursday. The full documentary is 10 minutes, and it launched on Facebook 360. So it's been up for less than a week. It already has over 2 million views on Facebook, which is great for VR. It's also available in the Gear VR headset. If you have one of those, it's in the Oculus app there. One of the most important lessons that I learned over the last year in working on this is that we are just scratching the surface in terms of learning what VR can do. What we're doing right now is taking what we know about telling stories and sort of stretching it, squishing it, molding it, stuffing it into this VR container. But what we need to be doing is figuring out what are the native storytelling techniques in VR. And so I look at that as mine and yours and everyone's collective project as VR creators, that we should be finding out what we can do with this medium. Tom had mentioned, it was Paul talking about the early days of TV. If you guys have ever seen one of the first television broadcasts is on YouTube, and it looks like this. It's 2 guys sitting at a table and talking. It's basically a radio show on TV. they didn't know then what a TV camera could do or what the format could do. And it's obviously progressed a long way. And I think that's where we are today with VR. So I'm really excited to figure that out, and I am excited that there are a lot of really smart people and creative people who are working on that, including many in this room. Just a couple resources. We have been documenting some of our process in a blog that's called VR 101 for Journalists.
The word empathy came up, and Nadia Pena, who's the godmother of VR journalism, talked a lot about this idea of empathy and VR being the empathy machine. Chris Milton talking about empathy, and that's what drew him to the medium. You kind of had a bit of a qualm with that a little bit, Tom. Is that what draws each of you to this? Why are you personally experimenting in this medium, and do you think empathy is really the thing with regard to journalism and virtual reality? Maybe I'll start with you, Tom.
Well, I do think empathy is extremely powerful in VR. I mean, I was playing a game on the Gear VR the other night called Dead Secret, and it scared the crap out of me because it's me inside the game, and I think that I don't think that to say that it's, I'm not trying to say it's not an empathy machine. I'm saying the empathy is a very particular kind in which you feel like you are really there, and I think that what you want to do is harness. I think that's just built into VR, the nature of the medium, and if you harness that part of it, which is that you can put someone there, and don't think that they're going to have empathy necessarily for that other person across the room, create a situation in which they are in someone's shoes that you want them to be in, like that solitary confinement cell, or some of these refugee camps and things, where if you're like, this is what it's like to be there, how do you like that? Then you can really harness the empathy for the person will have for not wanting to be in that situation.
Paul?
I would say, I'm just really careful with the word, empathy, and because when you think about empathy in VR, like, we think a lot of sad stories. Like, frankly, yes, I like hard news, but I don't want to watch it all the time, right? So I think part of VR is really asking yourself, what emotion do you want to evoke? And delightfulness is really important, right? And don't forget about the positive stuff. I would love to do a VR experience looking at fireworks. Why? Because it's delightful. Is it the most meaningful news experience? Probably not, but you will enjoy it, right? Versus, watching, tons and tons of, refugee stories.
Marcel, did you find any delight in the South Sudan?
I think the empathy question is very interesting, and I don't know. I haven't actually seen any data that backs that up, that VR is the empathy machine, and there are some social scientists who are working on that now. The Virtual Human Interaction Lab at Stanford is doing some experimentation with that. There's also several other ongoing experiments right now to try and find out if it actually does generate empathy at a higher rate than other mediums. So I'm very excited to see the results of that data, but I'm reluctant to say that now because sure, it seems plausible, but I'm the daughter of a scientist, so I want to see the data.
So you've done a lot of experiments so far, so in terms of the feedback you've had from audiences, what do you think is the theme?
I think they feel the story more so than watching it. And for instance, when individuals watch our Zambia story, when they see those people crawling towards them, something gets lost in viewing it outside through the filter of a fixed rectangle. I think being outside the video is a filter, but by placing people inside it, it's as if you are in Africa. I mean, you are seeing those people crawl right across the ground. In fact, people, reach out to touch them. And, when you give demos or anything else, that's what people do. They reach out, they think it's real. So to me, it's more visceral and feeling the video than just watching it.
I was at a conversation on Monday night, and Mike Woods from Framestore and from VR Lab was talking about the idea that really a lot of the metaphors, and you guys have mentioned this tonight, a lot of the metaphors we have from film, from video, are the wrong way to think about virtual reality, and you guys have hit on that a bit. But I want you to elaborate on that just a little bit. Why is it wrong to think about what we know in video, or how we produce for video, or how we tell stories in video. Why is it wrong to do that in virtual reality?
I don't think it's wrong all the way. Like, you know, a lot of people say there is no frame. Well, there is a frame. It's just that it's moving, you know, in the sphere. And a lot about, you know, directing the viewer's attention. You are still wanting to direct the viewer's attention, or perhaps give the option to not. So I don't think we need to totally abandon everything that we know about visual storytelling. It's that we need to think of it in a different way. But I still think, you know, as far as the story arcs, beginning, middle, and ends, you know, using real people in your stories, ethics, I mean, all the old things that we used to do should translate over in some way. We're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
I would say my background way before film and everything was theater, directing theater, and to me it's like, oh, I'm right back where I started in some ways, because to me, I agree, there is, I mean, you know, our eyes create a frame. This is my frame where I can see the world, but I'm not thinking about the frame because I'm just used to this being the way my head works. And when you place someone, I think of it as you're placing someone in the middle of a theatrical performance that wraps all, you know, it's like a site-specific piece of theater where there's an audience of one, they're in the middle, and it's happening all around them. And yes, you have to compose this frame, and also this frame, and also that, you know, you have to compose the entire environment. And, you know, it feels like, oh, the audience is the director, but not really, because you're hiding around the corner and you've orchestrated the whole thing, perhaps, which I think perhaps we want to talk about some of the ethical questions for journalism that raises about, you know, separate topic, but about when this is so orchestrated for VR, is it still journalism? Is it more documentary, like you were saying? But I feel like it's like doing a play that happens all around a person, and so it's just a different way of telling a story, but you're still telling a story.
I mean, I think at the AP we ask ourselves that question. You know, when people say, "Hey, we want to do a 360," I basically ask them why. Like, why is this more effective than 180? And if you can't really answer it, then I'm just like, you know, the cool factor doesn't work. Right? We're here to tell a story. We're not here to create, you know, a documentary film. So, you know, what about the environment that's to your left, to your right, and behind you that's crucial to your storytelling? And why should the audience be able to experience it as a complete experience rather than fragments? So I think a lot of these, you know, when we partner with our journalists, we really go down to not only figuring out the narrative arc, but we also really go detail into like the shot list. Like, what is it we're shooting? Why is it we're shooting? And what are some of the ethical standards, right? So we would never ask someone like, oh, could you like ride a bike around so that people could, it just doesn't work for us at the news. And, you know, so I think part of the challenge of news and VR is we have to capture that moment. And what that moment is still very much defined by the event. So, you know, for breaking news situation, for example, like El Chapo's tunnel, I think VR would work really well there. You're not going to see a whole lot, but it put you in that situation. It's just like, oh, how did he crawl out from this tiny tunnel? And, you know, how long is the tunnel? So it gives you a sense of depth that I think the 180 experience doesn't give you. But at the end of the day, you really have to ask yourself why. Don't do it because it's cool. Do it because it brings better experience.
So I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to go to your questions in the audience. This question is really just about sound. You've talked about sound and the importance of sound, but you know, in 360 video and spherical content, sound's even more important perhaps than it is in just typical video. Can you talk about that just a little, and then I'll ask each of you before we run to questions to say in brief, what do you think is the kind of minimum viable experiment for someone out here who's working in a newsroom or maybe wants to go out and experiment? What's the minimum viable set of kit they have to get started?
I'll just talk about sound. We did a hangout not too long ago explaining the differences between ambisonics, binaural, tetrahedron mics, positional tracking, and you can find that online, and it breaks it down in detail with sound engineers. We had a YouTube sound engineer who was in there talking as well. You still need regular lav mics to capture those interviews in addition to spatial audio as well. so you're not totally abandoning everything that you know about audio. And as far as minimal rigs, the Rico Theta, you know, it's only 1080p, but it's a great way to start, and you don't have to stitch it. And it posts to all the different platforms. I also have an iZugar 2 camera rig here today. If anybody wants to play with it or look at it, you can come up and check that out.
I just want to say one more thing about sound. Sound is extremely important, and I actually believe it's also very important in other forms of visual storytelling. I don't know if it's even more important in VR, but we took the time to capture audio that we could then map and spatialize and corresponding to the video. So we recorded 7 channels plus the lav, and then we mapped it, and then we put it on Facebook, and Facebook is mono. So, and when it eventually goes into one of the players that supports 360 spatialized audio, like the Milk VR player, we're going to be able to use that, but just don't panic about the sound and all of those words that Sarah's used and I use. You can, if you're just doing your minimum viable product or kit, you can just use, you know, a Zoom recorder with an Omni mic or something. And many of the platforms that are available now don't offer the spatial audio functionality.
I think the spatial audio is a huge part of, I mean, the problem with this being in the middle of the theater is that if the scene is happening all around you and you're like, where am I supposed to look? And we already have that problem, and the more that we can be like, oh, the door slammed, it's over there, and you'll know where to look just as you do in real life. I feel like that is going to enable storytelling so much more because it helps solve the problem of how am I supposed to know where to look. YouTube is bringing, we're going to have spatial audio in the next couple of months on YouTube platforms, so maybe you put your video on YouTube instead of just on Facebook. But yeah, I think spatial audio is a huge part. I'm a big fan of, I mean, the Rico Theta is great for experimenting. The video quality is still a little low, but the stills are quite nice, and I think a lot of times the still it just depends on what you're doing. And I also like the iZugar with the 2 GoPros. I feel like that's great. You still have to stitch it and all that, but I feel like, you know, send somebody out with a Rico Theta and just experiment and start to learn how to use the medium. The video quality is only going to improve. So
we put all of our stuff on YouTube. So very happy with that. I think sound is something that we cannot ignore in 360 because it's part of that experience. Because your sound will give you the cue of, again, why do you need to turn your head, right? Where in 180, you know, when you're watching a television, it doesn't matter where the sounds are. Like, there's only that one screen you're looking at. So I think sound would become much more important into part of our narrative, and that would kind of give you the cue of, you know, where the story is happening. In terms of Rico Theta, again, we also tried with the Fly 360. It's a really small device. We actually did that as an experience where we put it in a package in the UPS sorting facility. So we did a 360 video using the Fly 360 to give you a sense, if you are a package in UPS going through the sorting facility at Louisville, Kentucky, this is basically your experience. And I would say there's no mistakes right now. I would just do it. And, you know, Google had a lot of different things from StorySphere, so even with photo and sound, you could create a really positive 360 experience. Everyone is trying to figure out, you know, how to best tell a story in this format.
We're going to go to your questions, and Stina, am I right that we should use the mic at the back here? Do we have any other pass mics? I've got one here, if maybe someone would mind passing it.
She's happy.
So I've got a first question. Raise a hand. Okay, can you come to the mic, sir? Thank you.
Hi, I have a weird technical question, I guess. So like when you guys like stitch these together, it's always like the 360 thing, but have you guys ever stitched together like 2 separate shots? Because like I've never seen that. So for example, like
two separate shots. We're gonna move quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
2 separate shots. We're stitching them
I've
together.
stitched together 13 different shots.
As many as 13.
So we duplicated one person around the room and just used one GoPro and he did it once, and then he did a song again, and he did a song again, and did a song again, and then I just stitched that as though it was a single rig. And the nice thing is that because it was just one GoPro in the center, it could occupy the same physical space, and so there was no parallax, and so the stitch lines were very gentle. So it was a camera rig that existed in time, not in space.
What about something like a close-up on one person, but like a long shot of somebody behind them?
The camera would need to be in the same spot.
Same spot?
Yeah, if it's in different places, then you're not going to get a stitch.
And I think he'll have you down to YouTube and teach you more about
Yeah,
it.
all YouTube space.
Let's go to the next question.
Two quick things. The key mission, the new Nikon camera. Can anyone tell me any more about it than the 400 articles online that say there's nothing
I've
to know
held it in
about
my hand. It's really nice and small, and it's got these two lenses right close together. I'm very excited about it.
How much do we think it's going to cost?
I probably shouldn't say.
Why not?
Because it was a private conversation with
Journalistic principle. He
Yeah.
was off the record.
It's going to be affordable.
Let's go to the next question. Javier.
Hi, my question is, where do you see haptics in the future being involved in this 360 video process? For CGI, full immersion is not only achieved by having the goggles and being able to see it around, but also having controllers and position tracking. So I know that that's hard, maybe impossible right now to do in 360 video, but do you envision that happening anytime soon?
I would have loved to have haptics. The story we have coming out in a couple weeks is you're in Victoria Falls in Africa, and you hear the sound of the water. Like if there were some haptics that you could feel that vibration of what it feels like to be on the rocks of that waterfall and to feel it, like that would help. I don't know, do we put the vibration on channel 4? You know, I mean, that will be fascinating when we can actually put vibrations into our video.
Is that something that it's on the technical side, something that people are thinking about at the, level companies, research labs?
I feel like you see it a lot in the more gaming and computing applications and not so much in video, because with video, the kind of interaction that you could do with a video is still, that's kind of a ways away. All the things about the litro immersion and light fields and volumetric video is further down the road. I feel like haptics probably applies more to gaming right now.
There's a lot of work to automatically generate haptics from sound and video, which is interesting work. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I have a two-part unrelated question, which means I have two questions. The first is, I'm more interested in the immersion between documentary versus rather just news-oriented virtual reality. So this is a logistical question. When you're looking for a room to house a subject to interview or whatnot, what do you do with lighting? If you have to deal with a low light situation, are these cameras really equipped to deal with parameters where you'd have to actually augment and change the space in which you're filming?
We try to use all natural light, which is a really fun challenge. I've actually done that in regular video as well. But if you can't do that and you were inside and the GoPros do not function well in low light,
Yeah, just where do you put them?
you could use things like lamps, so things that would blend into the environment rather than these.
Okay. Well, I know we need to move it along. My second question is, you mentioned, I'm sorry for your name, but you mentioned when interviewing a subject, you were out of the room and you kind of just give them a list of questions that you want to ask. My immediate reaction as a documentarian rather than a reporter is to feel like I'm missing something in the interviewee subject matter relationship, being able to react on the fly on the information that they're giving me. How do you reconcile that with something like this medium?
What's lost?
Yeah, you don't, and you would have to judge it on a case-by-case basis. So for instance, when we work with translators, I was in there because it's really hard to do a translation with an interview. And sometimes it does get lost, absolutely right. As far as the lighting, there are also tools you can use in post-production. Skybox just came out with some tools that puts a glow and you can actually put a light on some of those areas. And what's wrong with having lights inside the sphere, right? We all know there's lighting.
You can also hide them around the corner and hide them in, if the camera has a blind spot, you can put lights down in
I'm
the
more
blind spot.
interested in the idea of being completely separate from the interview subject, which I thought was interesting. Thank you.
Next question.
Hi. I'll just-
It's,
Mike, I'm curious as to, and I mean this on a creative level and or a technical level, of, I'm wondering when you start a project like this, I'm sure the first time is probably nightmarish. So I'm wondering, like, when you're done, what did you expect would work really well and didn't, and vice versa? Or what did you think, wow, this is going to be great, this is going to work really well, and either people hated it or didn't communicate the idea? I'm wondering sort of your expectations versus the reality of where you're communicating completely differently.
so maybe we'll go down the line. One biggest lesson learned from these projects. If you had to just pick one thing that you thought was going to work and then it didn't.
Less talking is better. Like, just if you're in VR, you want things to happen to you, and to watch two people have a conversation that doesn't involve you is not as interesting as being involved.
One of the things that I thought was going to work was using voiceover so we do an interview off camera and then use that as audio voiceover. And it's a trope that's used very widely in documentary and news and television journalism. And from user testing, it did not work in VR, and I still don't know why, but we tried it for the first 6 or 7 iterations, and people go, "Who's talking to me?" And they start looking around. Even if you think that it's obvious there's only one person there, that they get really confused by it.
Did you solve that visually with text, or would you decide to just pull it?
Just don't do it.
We did. What we did is do an introduction first. So we had someone approach the camera and introduce themselves, and then continue later with a voiceover.
Sorry.
Sarah.
I just think text is some of the things that we've done that has a lot of text where they have to read a lot. It doesn't compute it.
I would say a little bit more annotations, because when we do VR, we introduce characters, and sometimes you come back and just like, wait a minute, like, who is this person talking to me? And so you just have to remind people, like, who all these people are, whether they're relevant to the story or not, because sometimes you see like
And
other
that
people.
seems to take advantage of the technology. If you're going to have this interface where you can put all different kinds of information, I mean, in an augmented reality, at least, I would think, like, oh yeah, what is this person trying to what's the history?
Sorry. Only because we can't hear you. Yes.
Yeah, is there a 3D word for lower thirds? Like,
Is there a 3D word for a chyron for a lower third?
We use the word lower third and super.
okay,
Lower
well,
third
that was
too.
just a follow-up to her. But
Yeah.
really quickly, most of you guys have really brilliantly talked about 3D video journalism. I was really particularly interested in the non-video journalism of the Eclipse, and the potential for 3D 360 infographics, or just non-video. Like, are there places that you guys are thinking about taking us that humans can't go?
So rendered content as opposed to the film.
Yeah, so we're not the first one who did it. Wall Street Journal did a VR experience visualizing the stock market as a roller coaster ride. So part of our collaboration, and it is a roller coaster ride, part of our collaboration with AMD is to actually explore how do we tell stories using the graphical experience. How do we kind of like, so one of the things we were thinking about is how do we render out this environment? I mean, you can't really go to space, so how do we create a space mission? Right? If we want to do a scientific explainer that, remember that movie where like, it was the guy who shrunk into like tiny people and go into the human body? It was like back in
Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah, so like, imagine you could do that in a VR experiment and just like, I'm gonna go to the heart, or I'm gonna go to the lung. You know, that's something that's very real that only VR could do, that currently is not.
That also happened a lot of Magic School Bus.
The LA Times also did one that was a CG rendering of the Mars rover. It was exploring Gale Crater, and it's what the Mars rover is seeing in Gale Crater on Mars.
And Edge of Space. Edge of Space is a great one by Concept VR and Deep VR as well. Google it and look it up. It's on YouTube.
I wanted to jump back and talk for just a second about text and lower thirds and whatnot. I feel like, to me, I think lower thirds is like a transitional, I think lower thirds in VR is problematic because I find myself watching The Displaced and the kid is talking and yet I'm trying to read what he's saying, but I'm also trying to watch him. And in our day-to-day lives, we don't have at least not yet, heads-up displays around us. And I feel like some of the most interesting game experiences when there are text is when they will place that text inside the environment. You know, like the way that you might encounter text in the real world. You know, oh, it's on a piece of paper that's on that chair, or just a large piece of text is like on the table. Also, too, if you get into stereoscopic VR, like things, if they're floating too close, then you can't focus out here, and you know. So I feel like we should try to put the storytelling into the environment as much as we can, and how exactly to do that is not completely solved yet, for sure.
Next question.
Hi, so my question was that how do you see citizen journalism getting integrated with VR? And if it already is, then do you think that it's an extension of it? Or like,
Really good question.
To what
So,
extent?
This is obviously this is a difficult medium. A lot of people breaking in. It's taking a lot of resource, a lot of thinking. How do citizens get involved?
I mean, with the Samsung S7 and the camera, like a lot of people are actually doing it. One of the startup called Hatter.vr, which is they're beginning to curate what average citizens are doing in 360 environment. So I would separate VR from 360. So I think in terms of right now, in terms of these citizens, they could do a lot more than 360 work, right? Like if you have the Samsung S7, if you've got the Ricoh Theater, you could do a lot more. The quality might not be, same level as documentary, but it's good enough for mobile.
Anybody else?
And I would say 360 is virtual reality only because it's all going to be in a headset someday. Video is all going to be in a headset, especially with what's happening with those light field cameras.